There are four words that most leaders never want to hear from their advisors and colleagues. I told you so. This morning, Westminster is awash with politicians who they say warned the Prime Minister about Lord Mandelson. HMS number 10 is still afloat, but only just. Peter Mandelson's fall from grace is now almost complete. Will he take the legend of New Labour with him? The long arm of the law is now reaching into the affair. Has there been corruption in high office? The Prime Minister says he was lied to and believed the lies. Who knew that the nation's top prosecutor could be taken for a ride so easily? Has the government's biggest scandal yet slipped entirely out of its control? We'll be joined by the man who nearly 20 years ago served as Peter Mandelson's deputy, the current Work and Pensions Secretary, Pat McFaden. We'll also get the opposition response from the Conservatives' Alex Burkhart. And is New Labour now old news? We'll discuss where has the scandal left the Labour Party's most successful incarnation with a Labour peer, Lord Glassman. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Annie Farmer, Jess Michaels, Courtney Wilde, Maria Farmer, Shauna Rivera, Michelle Carter, Lisa Phillips, Hayley Robson, Sarah Ransom. It's a roll call of horror. All women allegedly abused and exploited by Jeffrey Epstein. There are hundreds more. Then, on the other hand, there's Bill Clinton, Steve Bannon, Noam Chomsky, Ehud Barak, Jack Lang, Michael Jackson, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Peter Mandelson. All men, friends or associates of Jeffrey Epstein. The men had influence, money and fame. The women and girls, none of those things. This is a program about politics. We will rightly address who did what, when and why, and what it means for leaders here in the United States, in Europe and beyond. At the dark heart of the Epstein scandal, though, is a world in which men have all the power, the women and girls all the pain. And in spite of the presence of major figures like Kemi Badenoch and Angela Rayner, it is the nature of our politics that those who call the shots are still mostly male. But this morning, the shockwaves from the Epstein affair should remind us that it's not only economic performance or geopolitical stability that counts with voters. Decency and dignity still matter. On both sides of the Atlantic, administrations that only a year ago seemed triumphant are tottering, shaken by the Epstein revelations and the revulsion provoked by men who believed that they could treat women as playthings. Those men's victims want them consigned to hell. What we do not yet know is who they will drag down with them. The Mandelson scandal is the focus of our programme this morning, so let's start with the government. Just before we came on air, I spoke to the Work and Pensions Secretary, Pat McFaden. Pat McFaden, can we start with Lord Mandelson's employment? Just how much is he entitled to as a result of his termination?
That would be negotiated between him and his employers, who were the Foreign Office. So I don't know what was settled or agreed on that, but it would be a matter between them.
Morally, do you think he should, as suggested by some, pay this money back or give it to charity in the circumstances?
I think he probably should, yes. Either of those, either give it back or give it to a charity, perhaps one involving violence against women and girls. I think taking a payoff in these circumstances, I don't think the public will think much of that.
You and I have known him a long time. This is, if you like, a moral story. Is it a story of a degradation? I mean, how do you feel about this?
I have known him for a long time. I mean, how I feel, I think, is secondary to how a lot of the the women who were involved in this must feel, and other people reading about what happened to them, and that is the most important thing by far in this terrible tale. How I feel is a mixture of bewilderment, anger, and a sense of, yes, you're right, this is somebody I've known on a political level for 30 years. I was his minister, junior minister at the Department of Business during the financial crisis. And, that was a time of all hands to the pumps, banks collapsing, businesses collapsing, people wondering whether they could keep their homes or not. And the idea that he was live downloading some of the information about that to this person in America who I'd never heard of for many years afterwards, it is shocking.
Do you feel the word that's been used is betrayal?
Yeah, I do. And it's a strange thing in politics that you can have a close political relationship with someone, but there can be this entire other side of their life that you have no knowledge of and no involvement in whatsoever, which has all exploded into the public realm, particularly in the last 2 weeks.
We know that there are criminal inquiries going on. Have the police approached you?
No.
Okay. You know that when the criminal inquiries go on, one of the things that we often hear from police is anybody who can give information that might help their investigation or inquiries is asked to contact them. Do you think that you might have information, whether you know it or not, that could help the police in their inquiries?
I don't see that I have. I've never heard of this person. I've never had any contact with Jeffrey Epstein, never had any contact with them in any way. I don't think I've got anything to add to this story.
Do you know if the police have approached the Prime Minister?
I'm not aware that they have.
And can I just ask one other thing about this? You rightly have already said that the first group of people of whom one should be thinking here are Epstein's victims. Do you happen to know if the Prime Minister has met, spoken to, engaged with any of those victims? Because some of them, if not British, the crimes were committed here, as we understand it.
I'm not aware that he has directly, but of course he did speak on Thursday about issuing an apology to Epstein's victims for any hurt that they had over everything that's happened over this Mandelson affair. So he has spoken on the record about it, but I don't know any further contact.
The reason I ask that is because, let's say, if there had been a disaster or a murder, we've seen this time and time again. One of the things that the leader of our country does is essentially put his arm around the victims or the families of the victims. This is a monstrous set of crimes. Would it not be appropriate for the Prime Minister to do that in this situation?
I think the Prime Minister's acted in good faith throughout this. He's never been involved with Jeffrey Epstein. This is all from a time before he was even an MP, let alone leader of the Labour Party or the Prime Minister. He's horrified by what has emerged in the last couple of weeks.
But my point is, it's one thing to say, and it's another thing, because we see it again and again, to actually put yourself in the room with those who have
I'm not saying he wouldn't do that or I'm against him doing that, but the point I'm making is I think the Prime Minister has acted in good faith here and has found himself in a situation where all this has exploded. And to go back to where our discussion began, the person who knew about this relationship with Epstein was Peter Mandelson himself.
Yeah.
He's the person who knew there was all this exchange of emails. He's the person who knew how many years this had been going on for. Did he give the Prime Minister any sense of that relationship? I don't think so. We will see when all the vetting materials and everything is published, as I hope it is.
Okay.
But I don't think, the Prime Minister is the person who had this information.
Okay.
The person who had this information was Peter Mandelson.
All right, let's go back, if we may, to the appointment itself. Your colleague, Peter Kyle, sat in that chair and told me last autumn that the appointment of Peter Mandelson to Washington was, his words, a risk worth taking. Have a look at what he said.
A decision was made that based on Peter's singular talents in this area, that the risk of appointing, knowing what was already public, was worth the risk.
You obviously think differently now, but did you at the time agree with Peter Kyle that his singular talents were a risk worth taking?
I think it's not understandable for your viewers without thinking about why might this appointment have been made in the first place. Why did Tony Blair appoint Peter Mandelson to his cabinet, not once but twice? Why did Gordon Brown ask Peter Mandelson to come back from Brussels to join the cabinet? And why did Keir Starmer appoint him as ambassador? The ambassador appointment, I believe, was because the view was taken that, particularly with this Trump administration, a very highly political administration, and one that was also very transactional in terms of its view of business and deals, that someone who was politically experienced, had knowledge of business and had knowledge of trade would be qualified for the job. That's why the decision to appoint Peter Mandelson was taken.
There were options there. George Osborne.
Yeah, and I'm sure they were considered. And I don't know what swung it quite one way or the other, but that is why this appointment was made. And I think it's impossible to understand this story without some sense of why such a decision would be taken. You
will have seen this morning and in the last couple of days that some of your colleagues have let it be known that they advised against this. Deputy Prime Minister this morning, the former Deputy Prime Minister a couple of days ago. Is that true, that they advised against this appointment?
I can't know whether it's true or not.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's for other people to say what they advised or didn't. I don't know whether it's true, so they'll have to speak for themselves on that.
And do you think it's proper for them to do that now?
Again, it's up to them. I don't want to duck your questions, but...
that's exactly what you're doing.
But they're over 21. They'll have to answer for themselves on what they're saying.
Do you think it is a proper and honourable thing to do now?
It's a decision for them. I don't know what all the advice to the Prime Minister was on this. The point I was making a moment or two ago was I think your viewers have to understand, because they'll be thinking, why would this guy have been appointed? And they might be thinking all this stuff was known. It wasn't all known.
It's a bit rough, though. People have been part of this government. They've been part of the whole project. And suddenly, Prime Minister's in trouble, ship is listing to one side, and they're going, oh, nothing to do with me.
Well, I think the Prime Minister's acted in good faith.
I'm not asking about the Prime Minister.
I know, but in the end, this is about the Prime Minister. And I think that he's horrified by what's happened. He's issued an apology to the victims. And he will definitely wish he never made this appointment. But the real person who could have saved him from this was Peter Mandelson himself. And the question I come back to, as somebody who has known him for a long time, is why on earth did he apply for this job? And I'm not saying this in a whataboutery way, but when the job was given, a lot of the media were greeting this with, what a great stroke of,
lots of people said
big
that.
Appointment. I could go through them all. But he wasn't plucked from obscurity or disgrace for the appointment.
I get all that. Look, but as point you've made a couple of times in this conversation, you are the person in government who probably knew him best, I suppose, at a professional level. You'd worked with him, you'd been his second in command in the business department and so on. Did the Prime Minister or the Foreign Secretary or the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff seek your opinion when this appointment was made?
I don't believe I discussed this with the Prime Minister. And
They didn't ask you.
When I say don't believe, there's going to be all these documents. There's always a possibility of some document that, and you don't remember every piece of paper you saw. But I do not believe discussing this appointment with the Prime Minister.
So far this week, the Prime Minister's pinned the responsibility for this on Mandelson himself, on the failures of vetting, and also on his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, not the Prime Minister himself, but some of his allies have been saying this. Now, the thing is that this appointment is in the gift of the King acting on the advice of the Prime Minister. So it's Prime Minister's decision.
Yes.
But what role did Mr McSweeney play in this? And should he, as some people, many of your colleagues are saying publicly, be standing down?
I don't think he should. In the end, it's a prime ministerial, well, signed off by the King, but it's a prime ministerial appointment, and prime ministers have to take responsibility for the decisions that they make. Perhaps I say this as someone who was a former staffer, as they say in Number 10 myself.
Yeah, you were political secretary.
Way back in the day. And yes, you know, I don't know the advice that was given, but in the end, it's a prime ministerial appointment, and I think the stuff about Morgan McSweeney is sort of beside the point.
Well, in a way, this is you're coming to the point I want to make, because this is the Prime Minister's own judgment. It's all on him, but I have to say he did seem to suggest that actually he was lied to and so on.
Well, I think he does feel that.
And other people didn't give him the right information. You know, is this a case of the workman blaming his tools? And, you know, you might be one of the defective tools.
Well, I think he does feel he was lied to, and he'll be very frustrated about that. But of course, in the end, look, the loneliness of the top job is that you take responsibility for these decisions. Now, it turns out to be the wrong decision, but let's look at what happened next. When more information came to light in September, he fired Peter Mandelson. He's issued an apology to the victims of this. I believe that when the Prime Minister took the decision to make this appointment, he had no sense of Peter Mandelson's relationship with this man, as has been exposed in the last couple of weeks. And by the way, I don't think the Prime Minister is alone in that. I think people who have known Peter Mandelson for many, many years, including myself, had no sense of it.
When you have the top job, as Harry Truman had to sign on his desk, buck stops here. And it won't come as a surprise to you. Not all of your colleagues see the Prime Minister's conduct in the way that you see it. Let's listen to Harriet Harman.
He's got to stop blaming Mandelson and saying he lied to me, because actually he should never have been considering him in the first place. And to say he lied to me makes it look weak and naive and gullible.
The Prime Minister never misses a chance to remind us that he was the nation's top prosecutor. He said again and again, he lied to me, and I took it as face value. I mean, honestly, what kind of prosecutor takes the word and the reassurances of the person they're investigating?
Well, as I said a moment ago in response to one of your other questions, Peter Mandelson wasn't plucked from either obscurity or disgrace for this post. At the time of the appointment, I think he was, or around about the time of the appointment, he'd been Chancellor of Manchester Metropolitan University, regularly appearing on a Times podcast.
But he had also been sacked twice. Everybody knew that.
Higher Steward of Hull or something. Yeah, but he'd also been sacked twice. So, exactly, so let's get to the heart of it. You could have raised a number of things in his past, and there are people who would say
people did.
They alone would be enough not to appoint him. But in the end, the judgment was they were looking for someone who could operate at the highest political level with the Trump administration, who knew business, who knew trade. Now, that turns out to have been the wrong decision, and it's blown up in the most spectacular manner. But it's important for your viewers to understand why on earth was this appointment made in the first place? And that is the reason.
Look, what I think we both agree in this conversation is that in the end, this is the Prime Minister's decision. He himself says he got it wrong. The women involved would say that at the time this decision was made, it was said, and nobody paid attention to women's voices here. This is about the Prime Minister. Would the Labour Party now be better off changing the leader before this May's elections?
No, they wouldn't. And the Prime Minister is someone who cares deeply about violence against women and girls. He's made it a priority in government.
He says the words, but then he makes a decision which those women would say did not give weight to their feelings about this appointment.
Look, let us see what comes out with all this vetting process to see what was asked and what was said. I don't fully know, but I do know when I look at when the appointment was announced. If you look, for example, at the BBC website report of the appointment, there's not a mention of Jeffrey Epstein that day. So I think a lot of people saw this through a different lens at the time. But to your question about the Prime Minister, I believe he should stay. I think he's got a 5-year mandate, which was just voted for 18 months or so ago in a general election. His task is by no means complete, barely begun. And I also think it is not good for the country to change its Prime Minister every 18 months or 2 years. It's leading to chaos and uncertainty economically, politically, and reputationally around the world. So I know this has been a difficult week, but I think we should stick with the Prime Minister, support him. He admits he's made a bad mistake here. He has apologised for it, and I'm sure he will learn from that going forward.
Pat McFaden, thank you for your frankness this morning.
Thank you.
Well, let's see what our panel made of all that. We're joined all morning by a top-notch trio. The Labour peer, Aisha Hazarika, the former head of Channel 4 News, Dorothy Byrne, and the former Downing Street head of communications under David Cameron, Sir Craig Oliver. Aisha, I have to say, that was a rather un-McFaden interview, because normally they send him out in difficult situations and he does a great stone face. Speaking to him, I can see the word betrayal and all of that came up here. What did you think of his essentially defence of the Prime Minister?
Well, look, he has been sent out to defend the Prime Minister, and he was saying that the Prime Minister acted in good faith. And I have no doubt that the Prime Minister is, racked with upset and frustration and regret this weekend as this story is blowing up. But I think we've got to take a step back here. This has been an absolutely shameful week for the Labour Party, particularly a party which has always prided itself on wanting to stand up for women and girls. I have never known rage and fury and devastation, particularly from female MPs, peers, councillors, party members, as I have over this last week. And I think to take a step back, this is a story, and I know I will get told off for saying this, but this is a story about male power and a boys' club. What we saw from the Epstein files, the release of the Epstein files, was in absolute disgusting, sordid technicolor just what happens, who runs the world, who has unfettered power, and how these men connect with each other, how they do transactions with each other, and how they think they can act with impunity, whether it's the procuring of underage girls, whether it's leaking kind of secret information about state secrets to each other. And I'm afraid we have also seen a microcosm of that in politics, particularly Labour politics this week, where even after all of this, and look, I totally get that Peter Mandelson lied to the Prime Minister. Clearly, I get that and I understand that and I believe that to be true. But as you put it to Pat McFaden, why was there not more curiosity of mind in terms of probing these questions? Why was it thought that Peter Mandelson was the best guy for the job when there was a perfectly good woman doing that job? Well, the clip
Karen Pierce.
and I think the clip you played from Peter Kyle is the truth. Everybody knew that Peter Mandelson swam in these circles, that he mixed around with these big guys. He was, you know, seduced by wealth and power and men with yachts and all the culture that goes with that. That is why he got given the job, because the calculation was these are the slightly tawdry circles in which the US president moves. And we need a guy that, you know, swims in these pools, sits in these hot tubs, if you like, with these big guys. They can do business together. And that transactional thought was put over the victims of sex abuse. Now, we've had a huge hue and cry, rightly so, in this country about the Asian grooming scandal. Why did this global trafficking scandal not register in the same way? And I think we in the Labour Party have got to ask some very reflective, soul-searching questions about why it is that Peter Mandelson, not just by Keir Starmer, but by Gordon Brown and by Tony Blair, why was the party so seduced by Peter Mandelson? To me, it is about a male power structure.
Craig?
That was a deeply uncomfortable interview. And I think at the heart of it was Pat McFaden saying we were lied to, as if that was an excuse. Actually, what you've seen here, and what I think they're finding deeply uncomfortable, is that this has exposed an establishment that was prepared to override information that was clearly in the public view in order to, as Aisha says, put this man in that place. He was known as the Prince of Darkness. I worked closely with Peter Mandelson during the referendum campaign. It was clear to me that he was slippery and mendacious. It was clear to a lot of women, as Aisha says, that he actually behaved in a very bad way towards them. So I think what we're really, really struggling with here is we've seen a political establishment that is willing to say that transactionalism and a personal advantage is more important than doing the right thing, doing the values-driven thing. And I think that's why Pat McFaden was feeling extremely uncomfortable today, and why Keir Starmer is feeling so uncomfortable in all of this.
Dorothy?
People keep saying this story is all about women and all about the women, and then all they do is talk about men. And what's intolerable is the way that these men are making out that they are the victims. I'll just quote one Peter Mandelson. He's been having a really bad time. In fact, he said, I've had a lot of bad luck. This appeared yesterday. He said it felt like being killed without actually dying. And also it was like a 5:30...
This is from an interview in a national newspaper, I think.
Yeah, a 5:30 a.m. drive-by shooting. I mean, this man's a real victim, isn't he? And then there are all these other male victims who knew that they were the victims. I mean, poor Prince Andrew, as was.
Poor Prince Andrew.
He was too honourable. Mandelson was too trusting. The Prime Minister was too trusting. And, I mean, they were lied to. I mean, even Gordon Brown, sorry, they've all been having the most terrible time. And they say it's about the women. And what I find it as being like is, if you know, the toast to the lassies or the toast to the ladies, these dreadful dinners that you used to go to, and there'd always be a mention of the women. And they'd go, and now a toast to the ladies, and they're all wonderful. And what happens in all these political discussions all week is they go, well, the first thing that I have to say is this is all about the women. Yeah. And it's the women that we should care about.
I was just going to say, just to echo that, I think what's been extraordinary is the list of political columnists who've come out and used this phrase that it's a personal tragedy for Peter Mandelson and that he was a deeply talented man, and the tragedy is that a man of this talent has fallen. It runs right the way through the political establishment. And I think that when you have that conversation with people outside in the Sky studio, that kind of thing, looking at politics in the moment, saying, you guys don't get it.
And just to echo that, I mean, I raised this issue in the House of Lords amongst colleagues when some of these revelations came out and Peter was still ambassador just before he got fired. And to back up exactly what you've said, I actually had a lot of quite senior members of the House of Lords on the Labour side put in a complaint about me raising this issue because Peter Mandelson was held in such high regard. He was such a doyen of the Labour Party. And to your point about the victim, being the victim, I had quite senior members of the House of Lords say to me, Aisha, Peter is having such a terrible, terrible time. He's lost. He stands if people like you don't shut up, he stands to lose everything. You know, like that's the way it was framed. And in terms of women, I would really like to pay tribute to some of the brilliant women in the PLP, Polly Billington, Stella Creasy, Angela Rayner, Meg Hillier, who stood up after Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday and basically moved the government's position, rightly so. And Kemi Badenoch was right about this. You couldn't have a situation where the Cabinet Secretary was going to be the arbiter of what information came out. When the boss of the Cabinet...
That was the government's original proposal, that all the information should be released, but it would have to be checked by the Cabinet Secretary to make sure that it didn't infringe security issues and international relations, I think was the phrase.
Correct. And Kemi Badenoch rightly put a suggestion out saying it should be what's known as the Intelligence and Security Committee, which is an independent group of very senior cross-party MPs who have been security vetted. They are deemed capable of making this decision. And it was because of those women, particularly Angela Rayner and Meg Hillier. And I think what you are seeing is a lot of women, particularly on the back benches in the Labour Party, who are like, enough is enough. We are now pushing back on this culture.
Can I just say, people are saying, well, what should happen here? Should Starmer fall? Well, what should happen here is... we believe that more than 1,000 girls underage or very young women were trafficked and abused. Only one person has rightly been prosecuted, Ghislaine Maxwell. She should be in jail for many decades. Nobody else has been prosecuted. What's happening in the US about that? All these men who were there, among the cleverest men in the world.
Absolutely.
So they'd be great witnesses, wouldn't they?
We're going to come back to all of that in a moment. I'm going to ask you three just to get off the fence and tell us what you really think in a moment. But it is just gone 9 o'clock. This is Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Let's turn our attention to the Tories. A little earlier, I spoke to the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, shadowing the Cabinet Office, Alex Burghardt. Alex Burghardt, you drew blood this week with your motion to release government files relating Lord Mandelson's appointment to Washington. What do you actually hope to see in those files?
I think we hope to see exactly who knew what and when. But to a certain extent, Trevor, we've already heard the most dramatic piece of evidence, which was in Prime Minister's questions just beforehand, when Kemi Badenoch asked the Prime Minister directly whether he knew that Peter Mandelson had an ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein when he appointed him to be ambassador in Washington. And for the first time, the Prime Minister admitted that he had. He said yes. And this obviously throws the Prime Minister's judgment into the most sort of serious question, to the point where it's clear that a lot of people in his party no longer trust him.
To be fair, he did say that he knew, but not everything.
He'd also told us what he did know, which was that Mandelson had had an ongoing friendship which had crossed over the point of conviction, and that he had accepted Epstein's hospitality even whilst the latter was in prison and when he came out.
But the thing is...
it's just, this is in the court of the House of Commons and in public opinion, and I suspect within the Labour Party, this is unacceptable.
But the thing is, we know what we know. From your point of view, is indeed, as you've just said, what the Prime Minister knew was enough, as it were, to condemn him. Mandelson's gone.
He knew enough that he should never have appointed him.
What is the point of continuing to push with this?
Because this is about the Prime Minister's judgment. This is a very, very serious thing, right? The most senior diplomatic post that we have to offer is the ambassador's position in Washington. And the Prime Minister knowingly put someone in who was compromised. That is wrong. And the Prime Minister must ultimately take responsibility for this. And at the moment, he's refusing to do so.
So is it your case that Keir Starmer is not fit to be Prime Minister, and therefore will you be presenting a confidence motion in the hope of getting him sacked?
I think that the Prime Minister's position is untenable. I think that the Prime Minister...
That's not quite the same thing as saying that you do not think he is fit to be Prime Minister.
I've never thought he was fit to be Prime Minister, Trevor. What I'm saying now is that I don't think his position is politically tenable. Now, look, we don't have majority in the House of Commons. We can't win a vote. What Kemi has said is that because a lot of Labour MPs supported our motion on Wednesday to release these papers, and it was very striking. I was in there, I led that debate. I was in the Commons for 6 hours, and nobody stood up to defend the Prime Minister. And when I say nobody, I mean nobody on the Labour benches stood up to defend the Prime Minister. Angela Rayner stood up to agree with Kemi that the Intelligence and Security Committee should be given the information. It was very striking. You know, the House of Commons, as you know, has, on certain days, it has a mood, and that mood sets the tenor for what will come. And that was one of those days. I think the Prime Minister's position is untenable. Kemi has said, if Labour MPs want to come and talk to the Conservative whips about tabling a motion of no confidence, we would absolutely have that conversation. But without those conversations, there's no point in us doing so.
You're not going to win that
Not
vote,
without
are
the
you?
support of Labour MPs, but it's very clear that a lot of Labour MPs no longer have confidence in the Prime Minister.
One thing that may change, we've seen some of this morning, is the issue of payments on termination to Peter Mandelson. Are you planning to challenge that?
I think something that's very unsatisfactory about this is that we've been asking since Peter Mandelson was dismissed in September, since Kemi put the Prime Minister under great pressure, given the revelations about Peter Mandelson's relationship with Epstein, he was forced to get rid of him. We've been asking what the terms of this severance were, and the government has repeatedly refused to disclose those terms in a way that is just utterly wrong, given the need for transparency in this case. I understand there's a story in the papers about it being under the circumstances, quite a considerable payoff. Let's get this all out in the open now, and let's deal with it.
But in principle, what are you saying? That you think he shouldn't have the money, or that the government should stick to whatever the employment terms were?
Look, the government will have had its employment terms, but I think most people would think if you've been sacked for lying and for having inappropriate relationships, you shouldn't be getting severance terms like everybody else.
Underlying all of this is the question not just of whether Peter Mandelson himself behaved in an unacceptable way, but the question of whether someone of his type should have been appointed in the first place. That is to say, there was already a career diplomat there who we are given to understand would have been happily stayed in post, but the government wanted a political appointee on the grounds that with the, let's call it, unorthodox approach of the White House to international affairs, who could work for Britain in the best way possible. Do you now disagree that there should have been a political appointment?
I've got no problems with governments making political appointments in certain circumstances to roles like this. But again, there have been some very good political appointments to diplomatic posts in the past. But obviously, when the Prime Minister decides that they're going to do that, it makes it absolutely their responsibility to get it right. It was Keir Starmer's responsibility to get this absolutely right, and he failed, and he must take responsibility for that.
So probably right analysis, do the politics, but wrong person.
The execution was a disaster.
One aspect of this, which I think it's always easy to forget, of course, and people say in a rather performative way, you know, we've got to remember the women and so on and so forth. But in practice, when this choice was made, there were many people saying, think about the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Is Peter Mandelson, even in that, whatever his talents and capabilities, in that context, the right person? Do you think that enough weight was given to the opinions and the position of the women and girls concerned in this decision?
Well, I think that if the Prime Minister had stopped to think about what he was doing, he would not have made the appointment. And we now know that all of the evidence was in front of him, or enough evidence was in front of him when he made the appointment. The New Statesman had a piece on Wednesday which had seen the Cabinet Office due diligence report. It raised three concerns. The first concern was that Mandelson had been fired twice and that this was a red flag. The second concern was Mandelson's business dealings with Global Counsel, which had
that
dealings...
was the firm of which he was chairman.
A firm of which he was chairman, which had dealings in China and Russia, and the Whitehall was very concerned about that. And the third was his ongoing friendship with Jeffrey Epstein and Epstein's totally unacceptable and convicted behaviour with young women. And so all of this derives from the awful behaviour of Jeffrey Epstein towards young women. And the people who helped Jeffrey Epstein get rich by providing him with contacts and information are ultimately complicit in what Jeffrey Epstein did with that money, which was to control young women and supply them to men across the world in the most despicable way.
Are you suggesting that Peter Mandelson was in some way complicit with Epstein's crime?
It appears that he helped Jeffrey Epstein get richer than he was. I don't know what Peter Mandelson did and didn't know. He certainly denied that he knew about Epstein's dealings with child prostitution. But he would have known after the court conviction.
OK, well, Lord Mandelson's not here to explain himself, but he says that he feels he's done nothing wrong and was not in any way aware of any of these issues.
Peter Mandelson said a lot of things that subsequently turned out not to be true.
Gordon Brown has proposed a new anti-corruption commission. Do you think that's a good idea?
I mean, look, it depends what that commissioner would do and what their powers were and who they were. I think it's very easy for politicians to, in a moment like this, say, if there was only one additional role, everything would be fine. What's happened in this instance is that the Prime Minister had a clear choice, he had clear information, and he made a bad decision. And ultimately, there's nothing that can really guard you against that. If you're someone, like the Prime Minister is, with poor judgment, your own poor judgment will drag you down. It doesn't, you can't outsource that. There's certain things when you're Prime Minister, you simply can't outsource to other people.
Just one last question. I noticed this week that your leader, making a speech, was asked whether she admired any members of the Labour cabinet, and she said the only one she admired was Shabana Mahmood. Is that the same as saying that Shabana Mahmood is the only one she's afraid of?
No, definitely not. And I think...
Are you afraid of the whole lot of them?
No, right now I'm not afraid of any of them, Trevor. And but I think that Shabana Mahmood is someone who is trying to do something against the grain of what her party actually want, and there's some bravery in that. But no, look, I'm afraid. Some people will find it quite sad, but this administration under Keir Starmer has failed. It has U-turned, I think, 14 or 15 times now. It has had 2 resets in the past 5 months, and it is now caught up in the worst political scandal of my lifetime. And it's time for a new type of politics. I think that type of politics is embodied by Kemi Badenoch, who is honest, straight-talking and decent. And I'm very proud to be part of her shadow cabinet.
I'm afraid we've probably got to wrap this up now, but of course you know that there will be people shouting at the television saying 14 years, Tories, all that.
This is a new leadership. This is a new team around her. And I say one of the reasons why I backed Kemi in the first place was because of her integrity and her honesty.
Alex Burkhardt, thank you for your time this morning.
Cheers, Trevor, thank you.
Well, our panel's still here, Baroness Hazarika, Dorothy Byrne and Craig Oliver. Having dispensed our views, or your views, about Lord Mandelson, this scandal never seems to stop spreading. This morning we hear that in France, a figure called Jack Lang, who is a sort of extraordinary national treasure, been minister of everything and so on, 86 years old, been dragged into it and forced to resign from a prestigious position. How far is this going to go, Dorothy?
Well, it's not gone nearly far enough. I made 3 programmes about Ghislaine Maxwell, and she is a terrible, terrible person. But explain to me why she's the only person behind bars because of all this. So more than 1,000 girls and young women were abused. Some were children. They were trafficked across borders. And if a man has sex with somebody underage, it's his responsibility to know how old she is. It's his responsibility to know that she wasn't trafficked. So we see in the emails that lots of other men had sex with these women, not just Jeffrey Epstein. We see that there were other procuresses, is the old-fashioned word. There were quite a few of them, and yet only Ghislaine Maxwell has been done for it. So I know all these brainy men didn't see anything, amazingly, and Peter Mandelson didn't know anything because he was gay. And apparently, if you're a gay man, you can't see heterosexual sex offences.
No, you can't see it.
They're in some
it's
way...
like a myopia.
Yeah, you you know...
I have to...
Like a sort of...
I have to interject and say...
It's like a Specsavers
Lord
thing.
Mandelson was not here to defend himself, and I think what he said was that nobody would have involved him in that kind of activity because they knew he was not interested.
Trevor,
I'm just
read the emails. Read some of the emails that have since come out.
So what I would say is, in the US, all these legislators need to be looking at why there is not now a major investigation across states into exactly what happened, and there should be prosecutions. Now, here in Britain, we know, and again it's in the emails, but we know it from the picture with Virginia Roberts, that young women and girls were trafficked here. If you move a woman or a girl across borders for sex, that's trafficking. Why is that not being investigated? Then finally, I have to say, the royal family. Why are they getting off here? Yeah. Are we really to believe that the royal family didn't know what was going on? I know that this MI5 and MI6 are not really on Her Majesty's Secret Service, but in these emails, and I'll just finish by saying this, it shows evidence that Andrew was contacting Epstein to arrange a meeting for Epstein with some leading UAE sheikh while on an official royal trip with the Queen and Prince Philip. That is really serious, especially as we know that Epstein had Russian contacts.
I am required to point out that nobody from the royal household is here to explain any of this or defend themselves. Of course, if His Majesty wants to phone in or come into the studio before 10 o'clock, he's welcome. Craig?
I think in answer to your question about how far is this going to go, only 50% of the information is out there, and there's another 50%. I think there's probably a lot of people who are really sweating about all of this. But I think the broader point is, again, is the casualness with which people were prepared to commit to email information back and forth. If you are a senior government minister, the idea that you would use a government piece of technology to send something, not just because it's completely wrong and immoral and is betraying your country, but because this is going to be kept as a record. And I think that that says something about the people involved, is that they were so casual about this, they didn't necessarily understand. And the bigger, broader point is, again, that the people who are secondary and tertiary to this, the people who are choosing Peter Mandelson to be the ambassador, didn't really consider any of this. They put advantage and transactionalism above values. It was clear, it was in the open. Yes, he lied, but we did know all of this information. We have all met Peter Mandelson. We all know about what has gone on, and we knew that he had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
I should just, it was an interesting throwaway remark from Pat McFaden this morning as we finished our interview, in which he said, "I have not deleted any of my emails," which says that there is a consciousness within government.
He is worried.
What might...
but he's worried that there's going to be some piece of information somewhere where he was asked and he let it pass. And I think it shows the levels of concern across government about the reality is we did override all of this.
But just to take this back to the point that Dorothy brilliantly and eloquently made, I don't even think we have scratched the surface of the extent of this scandal and how deep it goes across these masters of the universe who have shaped almost every part of our lives for the last number of decades, from film to finance to business to academia to philosophy to politics, all of this. And I don't know if all the information will come out. You're right, only some of it has come out. We should be having a huge international investigation. The FBI should be looking at this. Who runs the FBI? One of Donald Trump's mates. We know that many women will not speak out about this because they have had death threats, which they take seriously. A number of women have committed suicide over this, but obviously the famous one is Virginia Giuffre. And why is it that it takes a woman to take her own life before anyone is believed? And all these emails come out when hundreds of women have come forward. And it just goes back to this thing that victims are never believed and these powerful men are always given a pass. And there is such a monumental cover-up going on.
Because they give each other a pass.
Absolutely.
Let us hold there for the moment. Still to come, I've got a Labour peer on the desk here, and soon on my left here, and soon I'll have another one on my right. Maurice Glasman is up next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Factionalism is the bread and butter of left-wing politics, and only one has dominated Britain's Labour Party for many years. The core trifecta of New Labour has produced 2 prime ministers in Blair and Brown, and a man who's put another men's premiership on the ropes. What next for the party? The Labour peer Maurice Glassman is here. Good morning, Maurice.
Morning, Trevor.
Let's start. Is it true that you advised the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, against appointment of Peter Mandelson?
Yeah, I mean, I was invited to the inauguration. And,
Mr. Trump's inauguration.
Yeah.
You're the only... I think you were the only Labour politician, certainly, who was invited.
Yeah, it seemed I was the only politician for Britain. There was Nigel Farage was there, but I didn't see him at the inauguration itself. But, I mean, that was because J.D. Vance years ago liked my writing and asked me about rebuilding the New Deal coalition in the Democrats. At that time, I'd never heard of him. Odd story. I went there and obviously I reported back. I wrote a confidential briefing document that remained confidential until last September, where somehow it emerged. It was leaked from somewhere, and that was to Paul Overton and Morgan McSweeney in Number 10, just filling them in on the scale of the change that Trump, and certainly when I was in DC, it was almost exactly a year ago, people just walked up to me with their phones with Peter Mandelson blowing out the birthday candles with Jeffrey Epstein and in his bathrobe. I mean, all these pictures.
Oh, you've seen that before all of this came out?
Yeah, I hadn't seen the one with the pants down in the hotel room, but many others. And if you know anything, I mean, in America, MAGA in particular, QAnon is a huge thing. Jeffrey Epstein is seen as a metaphysical evil of paedophilia that ensnares the rich and the powerful.
And you were seeing all of this last January 25, around the inauguration.
I just wrote, you know, whatever you do. What I wrote was he was the wrong man in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, it was a very inappropriate choice because he was walking... This issue of Epstein is massive in the States. I don't think then, a year ago, we understood the resonance of this story. This fulfills all the criteria of the international Jewish conspiracy, the financial elites, paedophilia. It's a massive thing in the States. Now it's here, and when a conspiracy theory is confirmed as basically true, this is a catastrophic event because it people lose all trust in their system.
So you say, look at this Lord Mandelson's relationships, and he's been friends with Epstein further and more deeply than we imagined, and you send this to...
I sent that to Number 10, as I said. I sent it to Morgan McSweeney and Paul Overton.
Paul Overton was another staffer in Number 10.
Yeah, very
who's now left.
Good guy, yeah. He's left. But, I mean, they didn't take my advice. But I think that they had no conception of two things. They had no...
By the way, you told them that these pictures and images with Epstein and, as you put it, the pants down, all that existed?
Yeah. Not the pants down, but blowing out the birthday candle, going underwear shopping with Jeffrey Epstein. I saw one of those. I mean, have you ever gone underwear shopping with another man? It's a very strange thing to do.
Happily, we don't have to discuss my life. But
I'm just saying, it struck me as odd, let's say.
So you send this document to Morgan McSweeney. Do you know what happened? Do you know if he talked to the Prime Minister? What?
No, look, I don't know what happened, and I have I actually really respect Morgan McSweeney. I think he hasn't had enough power rather than too much power. The thing is, we didn't understand two things, Trevor, and they're two big things. The first is the scale of this. The second is all this. Peter Mandelson was the creator and founder of New Labour. It was when he worked for the Kinnock campaign in '92. That was when he had his moment of things have to change. Labour doesn't have to be just more pro-business, pro-finance. He completely accepted the Thatcher economic settlement. I mean, New Labour was the most serious ideological shift of the last 40 to 50 years. And he was its founder and creator. And what they didn't understand was that this just led to sin and vice and squalor and deceit and perversion and disgusting actions. I think the only way ahead is to absolutely repent of New Labour. Labour has to publicly...
I want to come on to the New Labour, but just to get it absolutely clear, do you think that the Prime Minister, who says he was lied to by Peter Mandelson, was in any way aware of the, as you say, the scale of what was taking place, the strength of the connection to Epstein? Do you think that he should have been aware of this?
I don't think that he actually could conceive of this scale of duplicity, wickedness, and evil. Peter Mandelson was seen as the guy who did the Good Friday Agreement, a key figure. Lisbon, when he had a great understanding of complex deals, and there was a trade deal to sort out, and I think it was done on those,
So the idea was
terms.
It was worth taking the risk. Okay, so
I don't think he understood the scale of the risk. That's what I'm saying. If he'd had any notion, I don't think the Prime Minister knew who Jeffrey Epstein was. Let alone QAnon, let alone the political culture that was such an important part of Donald Trump getting elected in America was about all this.
Many people in the Labour Party are saying, in a sense, what you've just said, Prime Minister had to make a decision, but he was badly advised. And they point the finger at Morgan McSweeney. Now, you've got a high regard for Morgan McSweeney, but is it your view that he failed here and that he should pay the price for that?
Well, clearly, this was a failure. Clearly, Morgan as well seems to have had no idea of the scale of iniquity involved in this. But that's the problem, that Morgan has never really decided whether he's New Labour or Blue. He kind of pivots between them. Those were the two parrots on his shoulder. And New Labour were much more powerful than my group. There's Tim Allen in there and all these people.
So you founded Blue Labour, but are you now saying, as you say, Peter Mandelson essentially was a wellspring for New Labour, but of course, New Labour was more than Peter Mandelson. There are all sorts of people involved in that. Are you saying that New Labour is dead or should be dead?
I'm saying that it's a zombie, it's a walking corpse. I'm saying that Peter Mandelson was more important than you're suggesting in the intellectual and ideological formation. He ultimately chose Blair and Brown as the carriers in the Commons. He got Anthony Giddens involved with the Third Way. It was a very systematic, hostile takeover of the Labour Party, if you like. And his grandfather was Herbert Morrison, don't forget, an absolute giant of the formation of the Labour movement, and all of that. So Peter Mandelson is not just an important figure, he was the intellectual originator and the enforcer. He had an extraordinary work ethic, Mandelson. He really did this across the board. And what I mean is that the love of globalisation, not just the acceptance, but the worship of success and money. And that combined with a sort of Maoist managerialism with the lanyard and everything on the... this was something that we've got to look at and repent of. This is sin, Trevor. What's happened is sin. And when you sin, it's repentance that is absolutely vital. And that's what the Prime Minister and Morgan and this government need to do, is say, we were on the wrong track. It's not just a mistaken judgment. It's an actual sinful ideology.
You, finally, then, you're painting a picture in which the genesis of New Labour, created by Mandelson and those around him and so on, was going to lead to this end where Labour would crash. Now, in practice, the Labour Party is a political party, fights elections. The New Labour may die. Will it take the Labour Party with it?
Well, that's what's vital. That's why I'm saying that there's a very beautiful tradition within Labour of mutual aid, of people having solidarity with each other. It's been one of the great miracles of our country. Not communist, not fascist. Labour was straight with the working class. We won the war. Ernest Bevin is a hero. So Labour has to... The government and the Labour Party has to repent and reject New Labour as an alien body that took over the party, and this is where it leads. perversion and paedophilia.
Lord Glusman, that's strong stuff. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
In a moment, we'll return to our panel.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Well, our panel's still here. Baroness Hazarika, Dorothy Byrne and Craig Oliver. Just to clarify, I don't think that Lord Glusman meant to imply that all those who adhere to New Labour were inevitably paedophiles and so on. I think he was making more of, if you like, a religious point or a moral point about the connections with big capitalism and all of that. But there is a broader issue here, Aisha, that this is potentially catastrophic for the Labour tradition being associated with all of this.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said at the beginning, it has been a really shameful week for the Labour Party. I can't really remember people feeling this upset since the anti-Semitism scandal rocked the Labour Party. And as I said, particularly women who have had a great tradition, great feminists in the Labour Party of fighting for women and girls. I know some people will be shouting at the telly at this point, but you've never had a female leader, which is absolutely true. But I think it's a huge moral crisis for the Labour Party in terms of why is it that we have got into this position, and we discussed this earlier, the kind of values versus the transactional. But of course, it's a huge political crisis as well. And that is another, it's not the primary considerations, I think it is the abuse of women, but it is an important secondary condition. And the party is going to be thinking, really long and hard. I mean, I've spoken to so many MPs that have been out on the doorstep Friday afternoon, Saturday, length and breadth of the country. This is coming up on the doorstep. Now, if Labour was...
It's definitely cut through.
Yeah. It's massively cut through. And so many people said, particularly with female voters that they were speaking to.
We were saying earlier, or you were asking earlier about it being a problem for the Labour tradition. I mean, it's a problem for the country. I work in a world where I'm sort of dealing with lots of people from America, Europe, all around the world. And several of them have said to me recently, like, why can't your country just sort itself out? Pat McFaden was talking about the fact of changing prime ministers so regularly. Internationally, it looks absolutely terrible. And there is a serious problem here. One of the reasons for this is that we've got wrapped up in this kind of campaigning transactionalism vision of politics rather than choosing a vision for the country and sticking to it. And that has been a real problem right across the board in politics. And this is an exemplar of it. I think when you are talking to people out there, they are saying, you guys don't get it. You are all inwardly focused, caring about what does it mean for the Labour tradition, what does it mean for West Streeting or Angela Rayner or whatever. You're not spending enough time thinking about what does it mean to us and what does it mean for the country.
I haven't encouraged you to talk about the Labour leadership and all of that, but we'll spend a few minutes on that a bit later on. But I thought Glassman was raising a deeper point about morality and politics, or the relationship between morality and politics. And of course, he used slightly apocalyptic language. But do you think, Dorothy, that... I'm not going to talk about good coming out of this episode, because there isn't going to be, but the reconnection, if I can put it this way, between political practice and the ideas of morality, might that be one of the consequences here?
Morality and politics, as far as the British people are concerned, have been drifting apart over 20 years. If you look at the figures, excuse me, for what people think about politicians, it's down, 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 passing tabloid journalists on the way down, passing estate agents on the way down. It's really low. And this is so low. We have to remember that Keir Starmer knew that Mandelson, to be the new US ambassador, had lived in the house of a convicted paedophile while that paedophile was in prison. And for all a few Labour MPs are now coming out saying, oh, I told him that wasn't a good idea. Where did I hear Kemi Badenoch, even Nigel Farage? Where did I hear them all going, this is an absolute outrage. How can that man be given this job?
Well, you saw Alex Burkhardt earlier as well talking for the Conservative Party and said the thinking was right. No, the thinking was not right. Yes. The thinking is that there's transactionalism and that somebody who's prepared to engage in that way should automatically be vetoed from this. And I think that is something that the political establishment is really struggling with. I have read endless pieces this week from people saying, actually, he's a smart guy, he's brilliant, this is just a personal tragedy. No, this is what is being missed here.
And I think it's a much bigger conversation about culture in politics, but also in the other echelons of society, media, business, academia, all of those kinds of things. But I think why people are so frustrated is, A, this is a scandal which is easy to understand because it is about abuse of women and girls and trafficking and rape. But secondly, people wanted and hoped for change with this new Labour government coming in, and people were very sick of what they perceived to be corruption and sleaze and incompetence from the Conservatives before, and they want change. And look, change is difficult to deliver. It's very difficult just to turn around 14 years in 18 months. But I think they want they wanted a different type of politics. And I do believe, and I know, I think Keir Starmer is a deeply, deeply decent man, but I think the culture of how we do our politics, including in the Labour Party, and he has to take responsibility for this, we are so out of sync and so out of touch with where kind of normal, you know, fair-minded, good people are.
I want to come back to the sort of raw politics and the polling and all that in the next part, but just before we go to the break, Dorothy, I wonder, and I'm listening to your conversation, and one of the things I'm wondering here is if this is part of the Trump effect. I'm famous for saying, think of Trump as a symptom, not as a cause, but the decision to take this risk was really influenced by what people thought Trump's White House would require. And I wonder if part of what we're seeing now is the impact of the way that he and his White House does his business.
Well,
Dorothy, and then Craig, quickly.
Well, what I would say is, yes, whenever you're sycophantic to a bad person, you're going to go wrong. But I would remind you, David Cameron made Andy Coulson his director of
former
communications.
editor of the News of the World.
When it was known he was a crook and he had hacked, although he hadn't yet been done for it, and he ended up having being sent to prison for 18 months for what he did. And we all knew when Cameron gave him the job that he was crooked. And yet he took that risk because George Osborne thought it was a good idea. And look what happened. And that's just like this.
All right. The accountants are telling me we've got to go to a break. Let's return to our panel in a few moments.
There's a fresh look to your news from 10 on Sky News. It's a new show called The Wrap, every night of the week. We'll still bring you the day's biggest stories, but with more lively debate, more in-depth commentary, and more of what you need to know. Plus a look at what's making tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10 on Sky News.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
No freedom!
Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening
question is why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Let's return to our panel one final time. Aisha Hazarika, Dorothy Byrne and Craig Oliver. Look, let's remember, we are a politics show, as much as I'd like to turn it into a religious revival meeting, and this has had a massive impact on politics, particularly on the standing of the Prime Minister. And we can have a look at the latest polling on the Prime Minister, which Labour voters, this is Labour voters from 2024, should Starmer stand down as Prime Minister? And 40% think he should, but nearly as many think he should stand down. Aisha.
Well, look, I'm not going to spin you in line. This is very, very difficult for the Prime Minister right now. MPs are hearing this on the doorstep. In terms of what should happen or what will happen, the answer is I don't know. Personally, I think it would be mad to plunge not just the party, but the country into a very difficult leadership challenge, particularly in the run-up to incredibly consequential elections in May. There isn't an evident successor waiting in the wings. It's not like during Theresa May's time and you had Boris Johnson. There could be some unintended consequences. I also think that a lot of the country, and I hear this a lot from my own listeners on my radio show, many of whom are not Labour supporters, saying, hang on a minute, we might not be pleased with everything that's happening, but we did actually vote for this guy. We didn't vote for some of the other people you might put in. So I think there's, and they say, look, we're sick of the psychodrama with the Conservatives. And I think to learn from the Conservatives, changing your leader is not a panacea. It's not a magic one. The structural issues will still face that person. My final point is, the Labour Party exists not to be a party of protest. We exist to get into power. And in the entire history of British politics, only 5 men have got Labour into power, winning power from the Conservatives. Keir Starmer is that 5th man. So I do think he's done something that very few Labour politicians and leaders have done. He's actually got Labour into power. So I think it would be a bit mad to do anything soon, but people are not happy. I accept
Craig,
that.
the teachable moment from the Conservative experience.
Look, the argument for getting rid of Keir Starmer is it's over. He's a dead duck. He's not going to get any better than this. It's over for him. And I think that a lot of Labour Party people are looking at him and saying, look, we've still got 3.5 years to go. Maybe if we switch, we can be in a position where we can restart and actually put in a programme of government that works. Aisha's right. I think the danger of getting rid of Keir Starmer is you end up going out of the frying pan and into the fire. Does anybody seriously think that Angela Rayner or Ed Miliband or Wed Streeting, who's apparently also going to be damaged by this when further information comes out, is going to make it any better? And I think for the general public, that is contributing to this sense of like, are we just going to have another 3.5 years of you guys arguing the toss between yourself, apparently nothing ever getting done, and down and down and down, and the populists are the people that benefit from it?
Well, let me put the devil's advocate case. That maybe not now, but it's probable that Labour will take a tonking in the May local elections, and after that, the country can't have a lame duck Prime Minister for 3 years. That's 3 years of drift and paralysis, and that it may be time for somebody new to come in and, if necessary, to seek their own mandate.
Well, Labour are doomed anyway. Let's be frank about that. They're not going to win the next election.
The election is a long time away. I just think
well,
sometimes
they're not doing anything that's
sure. But just remember Hartlepool by-election. Everybody thought it was going to be over. Boris Johnson was going to be in power for another 10 years. So things can change.
But is it good for the country to have yet another Prime Minister? I see your point. How do we look internationally? It's like, you know, to lose one parent is unfortunate. To lose, you know, from the importance of being earnest, we just keep losing prime ministers. It makes us look ridiculous. Keir Starmer was absolutely wrong to appoint Peter Mandelson. He knew enough about him to know he shouldn't have done it. But the idea that Keir Starmer is going to take all the blame for this, there are men across this country and across the US who should be taking the blame.
But I suppose, and I think we're agreeing on this, is there's a kind of devil's dilemma, which is you stick with him and there is this 3.5 years of drift. Does anybody seriously think that Keir Starmer can get a grip of his backbenchers? It was over from the point that they lost the welfare vote. Each successive step has revealed that he's not in charge, the backbenchers are in charge, and they're just trying to work out, can we do better with somebody else? But that sense of drift, if he maintains, is a real worry, and I think we've got to reverse back and consider that.
Well, all I would say is, I mean, things have been very, very difficult, but it is, I think sometimes there is a bit of an unbalanced view that everything is absolutely terrible. Everything is not absolutely terrible. There is progress being made on the NHS. Just this week, Wes Streeting announced a really good cancer strategy. There is important work being made in terms of lifting children out of poverty. There's important decisions being made in terms of defence and infrastructure. Now, what Keir Starmer has got to do is get better. He himself has got to do a lot more. He's got to sort out his team in Downing Street, see what happens after these local elections. I do take your point about drift, but my thing is, who magically comes in and just saves the day? What do the markets do as well in terms of all this chopping and
they'll
changing?
love Angela Rayner.
And I do think as well that a lot of Labour MPs, they are grumpy, I'm not denying that, but they also do not want to see Nigel Farage become the next Prime Minister. Well, I think they should show Keir a bit of loyalty, but Keir Starmer should also reach out to them and not go to war with Labour.
Nigel Farage, that's it for this week's show. I'll be back next Sunday. What an extraordinary moment. Join us again.